sorry, we live streamed. Yes, got it. Thank you very much. And again, at the same time, thanking Dipesh Bhai, we thank each and every one of your RPM family members for joining in and supporting us to yet another very informative evening. જે આપણે ઘણી સારી માહિતી આજે આપણને દીપેશભાઈ આપવાના છે અને તમે બધા એમાં જોઈન થયા છો તો બધાનો ખૂબ ખૂબ ધન્યવાદ. અને જનરલી આપણે ગીત સંગીત કોમેડી જે કરતા હોય છે આનંદ માણતા હોય છે ત્યારે આપણે બધાને જ યાદ કરીએ છીએ કે આપણે આનંદ માણીએ છીએ તો આપણે ભગવાનનો ખૂબ ખૂબ આભાર માનીએ છીએ, થેન્ક યુ કહીએ છીએ કે આપણે અત્યારે આટલા ખુશીમાં છે. વી આર સો થેન્કફુલ ગોડ ફોર blessing us with all the important, all the necessities of life, for joining in and supporting us, but at the same time, informative in evening. In the world out there, people are suffering, so we pray for each and every one who is suffering, maybe physical, financial, mental, whatever difficulties they're in. God, please protect them, protect them, protect them. And we also pray for all those beloved souls that has left us. God, please rest their souls in peace. આપણે ખૂબ ભગવાનને પ્રાર્થના કરીએ છીએ કે અત્યારે જે કોઈ તકલીફમાં હોય, શારીરિક, આર્થિક, માનસિક કોઈ બી તકલીફમાં હોય તેઓની રક્ષા કરો, રક્ષા કરો, રક્ષા કરો. અને આપણા સ્વજનોને જે પણ આપણે ગુમાવ્યા છે તે બધા માટે આપણે પ્રાર્થના કરીએ કે તેઓના પુણ્ય આત્માને પ્રભુ પરમ શાંતિ આપો. At the same time, આપણે નામ લેતા જ રહેતા હોય છે આપણા રેગ્યુલર RPM family members who is suffering. કાલે મેં બધાના નામ લીધા હતા. But yet again, we keep praying for each and every one of them. Like I said, Acharya uncle is not well. Ranjan Ben in Canada, so she's recovering. We're praying for everyone. And it was good to see Chanda Ben back again, so as well. And Niru Ben is from South Hero as well, North Hero. એના માટે પણ આપણે પ્રાર્થના કરીએ છીએ. And yes, again, yesterday I did say કે અમારા પૂજ્ય અદા છે, પપ્પાના મોટા ભાઈ છે, એ બીમાર છે, પણ આજે ફોન કર્યો તો પ્રેયર્સ જે આપણે સમૂહમાં પ્રાર્થના કરીએ છીએ એની શક્તિ કેટલી છે. આજે અમને સમાચાર મળ્યા કે એની તબિયત થોડી સુધારા પડશે, તો આપણે સૌ કોઈ માટે પ્રાર્થના કરતા જ રહીએ છીએ. પ્રભુ સૌની રક્ષા કરો, રક્ષા કરો, રક્ષા કરો. કોઈનું નામ ભૂલાઈ જતું હોય તો માફી માંગુ છું, but we pray for each and everyone who needs the protection from God. Please protect them, protect them. Once again, Dipesh Bhai, very warm welcome. We'll just say a short prayer and we'll hand it over to you. Like I said, 7:15, it will be all yours. Again, બધાને નમ્ર વિનંતી, કોઈ પણ પ્રશ્ન હોય તો પ્લીઝ તમે ચેટમાં લખતા રહેજો. Try not to send it on phone because મારો ફોન હશે જ મારી સાથે, પણ ચેટમાં લખશો, હું ફોટો પાડતી રહીશ અને આપણે પ્રશ્નનો ઉત્તર છેલ્લે કદાચ તો તમારા જવાબ બધા મળી જ જશે. So we look forward to a very informative evening. Again, if I say so, Dipesh Bhai has ખાલી એક ફોન કોલ કર્યો તો મેં કે વિનંતી કરી કે અમે સાંભળ્યું છે Dipesh Bhai is very good at he's doing this. I'll let him explain everything what he does, but without a hesitation બધાની સેવા માટે એને હાજર થઈ ગયા, એને હા પાડી કે હું જરૂરથી આવીશ RPM ના પ્લેટફોર્મ પર. So આપણે again, we are very, very humbled, very grateful to Dipesh Bhai for giving up his time doing this seva. So thank you very much, Dipesh Bhai, and we'll just do a short prayer and then over to you. Namaha Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Bandhu Cha Sakha Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Kayena Vacha Manasendriyeva Buddhyatmana va prakriti svabhava karoni adyam sakalam parasmai narayanayechi samarpayami narayanayechi samarpayami. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe Om Shanti 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 Sarvane Jai Shri Krishna Dipesh Bhai Jai Shri Krishna Bhai Sarvane Jai Shri Krishna Dipesh Bhai and Jai Jinendra. Jai Jinendra. Over to you.
Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Jinendra. Thank you to Rohini Ben and Paresh Bhai for inviting me to present today for the RPM family. A real privilege and an honor for me to present to your audience, your family today. So what I'll do is I'll start sharing some slides, and we'll have a look at inheritance tax, the steps that can be taken to reduce the impact of inheritance tax and to make sure more of the money stays within your family. So welcome to today's presentation entitled Inherently Unfair. So even the Chancellor has said that the inheritance tax system that we have in the UK is overly complicated and unfair. So what I'm going to do is try and help you with regards to inheritance tax, what you can do and what you should be doing to make sure that your planning is as efficient as possible. So I'll start off with a brief background about myself. I've been in financial services since 2005. I've been advising clients for just over 15 years. So got many years of experience. Really enjoy helping clients deal with their financial planning, making sure that it's done correctly. And it gives me huge satisfaction in knowing that we've done the right things for them, for their family, and it helps them, their future generations, and minimizes the amount of tax. So it's all about making sure that the right steps have been taken at the right time. So 16 years of industry experience, many years of helping clients. I've been running Oakdale Financial Services for the last 10 years. Oakdale Financial Services started in 2011. So I'll just give you a quick background into St. James's Place. So St. James's Place is a leading UK wealth management organization. They started in 1991, and during that time, they have become a FTSE 100 company. They look after 129.3 billion worth of funds under management. We provide a trusted service. We like our clients to feel that they can come to us. We'll give you the correct advice and make sure that we act and do the right things for you. So through St. James's Place, we have access to a wide range of products and services, and this allows me to advise the clients in the correct way. We also have the advice guarantee provided by St. James's Place, which gives you great peace of mind. So the key objectives for today's presentation, today's session, is really to have an understanding of inheritance tax planning, the steps that can be taken to mitigate the financial impact of inheritance tax on your family, on your loved ones, and to make sure that assets can pass in a tax efficient way to the future generations, which will help them in the future. So what we'll have a look at as part of today's session, we'll have a look at some of the concerns that people have in relation to inheritance tax planning and financial planning in general. When you have a look at these concerns, you will see that a lot of these will apply to your situation, and certainly you should be able to relate to those concerns as well. We'll have a look at some initial planning ideas in terms of some options available, the nil rate bands, what they are, how they work, what happens where you have assets over £2 million. There are some additional considerations to take into account. We'll have a look at the problem of inheritance tax at 64%. We'll have a look at gifting and also the 7-year rule. How does taper relief work? We'll also have a look at wills and lasting power of attorney. So really important part of your planning. We'll look at the different types of trust-based planning and how these can be used to maximize your planning. We'll look at whole of life insurance, various types of life insurance, how it can be used to help to protect or cover your liability. And then we'll have a look at a couple of other different types of investment ideas, such as enterprise investment scheme, business relief, main residence property planning, some of the questions, some of the options that apply in relation to your main property residence. And then we'll finish off with question and answers. So hopefully during the presentation, it will answer a lot of the questions that you may be thinking about already. The presentation may generate some additional questions. Happy to go through those with you at the end. If we're not able to answer all of your questions, then it may be some particular questions may require some further information, some further analysis. And in order for me to give you the correct answer, it would be useful to have a conversation so that we fully understand the situation, and then we can advise you accordingly on what options you have available. So these are the concerns that I mentioned previously. So let's have a look at these concerns that a lot of people have. So when we have our meetings, when I do these presentations, when I'm talking to people about inheritance tax planning, these are very real, very relevant, and they apply to the majority of people. You'll look at these and you might think about your personal situation, and you'll see how it fits in with your situation as well. So first of all, people are concerned about inheritance tax, especially the cost of the estate and how much money are you going to be able to pass on to future generations. So inheritance tax, we know, is an ongoing, increasing problem, i.e. your assets is going to continue to increase over a period of time. And this means that your inheritance tax liability is going to increase as well. So we need to pay close attention to your planning. What about the fact that you have to pay 40% tax at the point of death? We already pay a lot of tax during our lifetime. So for example, if you think about, you pay income tax on any income, you pay tax on any rental profits you make on, or rental income you receive from buy-to-let properties. When you sell a property, not your main residence, but other types of property, other types of assets, then you've got to pay capital gains tax on that. You have to pay VAT, you have to pay national insurance. That's a lot of money that goes in tax. If you include all the taxes that you pay during your lifetime, plus a further 40% at the end, that's a lot of money. You want to be able to give money away, but you'd also like to retain some control over the capital or income. So the key thing to consider is, once you've given the assets away, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to have access to that money if you need it, if your circumstances change. There's no guarantee that the money will still be available. The money may have been invested, and there may be some tax penalties, tax consequences to be able to take your money out. And in some scenarios, we have come across where the parents have gifted the money to the children, but unfortunately the children have squandered it. So again, it's reducing money that could be available. So when we talk about giving money away, you've always got to make sure that you have enough for yourselves. You don't want to leave yourself in difficult financial circumstances later on. So we have to take that into consideration. You may need access to money in the future after giving it away. So for example, your health may change, your life expectancy may be reduced. There may be things where you think actually you need it, but you've given it away. So before you give away anything or any amount, you've got to be really careful, really clear how much you can afford to give away. You have to bear in mind that life expectancy is increasing, i.e. people are living longer and longer. Therefore, you need to be able to rely on your money or your security or assets over a longer period of time. So we also know that, yes, you can give assets away, you can survive 7 years, and after 7 years, the assets will be outside of your estate from an inheritance tax point of view. However, we also need to consider that sometimes, in some cases, 7 years may be too long. unfortunately, not everyone is going to survive 7 years. The COVID situation, unfortunate COVID situation, has shown that nothing should be taken for granted, and that people should seriously be thinking about making sure that they're planning, because you want to leave things in an efficient way. So planning is key. Now, 7 years, if you're elderly, of course, it reduces the chances of you surviving 7 years. If your health is not particularly good, then again, that may raise concerns over whether you can survive 7 years. So we know that 7 years in some cases can be too long. And also there's uncertainty. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And a lot of people often say to us that there's not enough time to manage our wealth. We're busy working. We're busy looking after the grandchildren, social life. Of course, I get all of that. But the key thing is to make sure that you're planning things in a correct way. Start thinking about your planning if you haven't already done so. If you've already started planning, just think about what you've done, whether it's sufficient or whether you need to do more planning. For me, inheritance tax planning is ongoing planning that we do for all of our clients on a regular basis. And the other thing that we also come across is people are not sure if what they're doing is correct. Inheritance tax planning is complex. The rules do change on a frequent basis. And a lot of times we get told, my friend said you could do this, my friend said you could do that. When we look at the information, we know that that sort of planning is never really going to work. So you've got to be careful. Now, one thing I would say about inheritance tax and why it's such a topical area, where I've done many of these presentations, these webinars across different communities, different audiences, I found that the topic is very well attended. And one of the reasons for this is that, first of all, no one wants to pay more tax than they need to. But also, previously, inheritance tax used to be a tax for the very wealthy. Now, I look at it and think of it as a tax that applies to most normal people, i.e. one main residence, one buy-to-let, a little bit of cash. And you can soon see, with the way property prices are, especially around London and the Southeast, that a lot more people are going to have inheritance tax problems. Asset prices are increasing, allowances. So now it's actually a tax that impacts and affects a lot of everyday people. So sometimes people don't think they're that wealthy, but asset prices have increased, and they'll find when you add everything up, you're actually close to the million, or you're already above the million. So if you're close to it, you need to start thinking, start planning, start doing something. And if you're over it, again, planning is going to be essential. So what we'll do now is we'll start off with some initial planning ideas. Now, these are important in terms of your overall tax planning, but they're also going to be part of inheritance tax planning as well. So a lot of times you may be familiar with ISAs. You get a lot of information, especially towards the end of the tax year, to say make sure that you're utilizing your ISA allowances. Now, ISAs are great from a income tax point of view. They protect any gains in the ISA free from income tax. They're tax efficient from a point of capital gains tax, so there's no capital gains tax to pay. But in terms of ISAs, you've got two main types of ISAs. You've got a cash ISA, where the money sits in essentially a cash bank account, and you've got an investment ISA. Now, with cash ISAs, the problem you have is that the base rate is very low. The Bank of England base rate is 0.25%. So this means that the rate of return you're going to get is usually going to be around about this figure, maybe slightly less, maybe slightly more. So let's say, for example, you're getting an interest rate of 0.5%. Now, from a interest rate point of view on your cash ISA, that's not very good. But also you have to bear in mind that the money that you've got in the cash ISA will be subject to inheritance tax at 40%. So if you've got £100,000 in this investment, in this cash ISA, you're going to get 0.5%, which equates to £500 of interest. But at the same time, you're going to lose £40,000 at the point of death. So clearly you can see that this is not an efficient way of holding your money. We have to look at other ways of how you hold your money, your investments, because there's no growth. The interest rates are very low. The inflation is actually more than 0.5%. So that means in real terms, you're getting poorer. So we have to think of some solutions to be able to improve this situation. You also have investment ISAs where the values will go up and down. But again, these investment ISAs, or cash ISAs, they're going to be part of your estate from a inheritance tax point of view. So we have to just look at how you're structuring assets. They never tell you that ISAs are not inheritance tax friendly. You always get given the message that ISAs are great. Yes, they are from an income tax point of view and from a capital gains tax point of view, but nothing from they don't do anything from a inheritance tax point of view. We should consider maximizing contributions to your pension. So every year you're allowed to put in, subject to earnings, a maximum of £40,000 into your pension. Now, the great thing with putting money into a pension is if, for example, you're a basic rate taxpayer and you put in £8,000 into your pension, then the government will automatically top it up to £10,000. If you're a high rate taxpayer, you'll also claim back £2,000 from your self-assessment. So you'll put in 8, you'll have 10 in your pension, and you'll claim back £2,000 from the HMRC. So that means it's going to cost you £6,000 to get £10,000 into your pension. Now, with pensions, you also have the opportunity to go back 3 years. So providing you have the earnings, or if you're part of a limited company or you own a limited company, there is opportunities to use pensions, especially where you've got other assets. You're not relying on that pension income. Certainly, pensions is a great form of inheritance tax planning, especially with all the changes that have come in. So before, people used to be a little bit reluctant to put money into pensions. Now, whilst you're working, you've got the income, it's a great opportunity to put money into pensions. If you're not working, you haven't got income, or you've got income which is, let's say, for example, rental income, but no actual earned income, then you are able to put in £2,880 into a pension. The government will top it up, and this amount will be topped up to £3,600. So again, you're able to make use of pensions. You're able to make use of going back up to 3 years. And pensions are very attractive from an income tax point of view, from a capital gains tax point of view, and also from a inheritance tax point of view. So we'd certainly recommend you to review what you're doing there as part of your pension retirement, and also your inheritance tax planning at the same time. Now, with pensions, majority of people here will probably have defined contribution or money purchase pensions. There may be some people which have some of the old style pensions, which are like final salary, or they call defined benefit. Now, in certain circumstances where we can show that there is other assets, other income in the background, it may be possible to leave a final salary pension so that it goes to your family. It continues in your family. Now, normally what happens with a final salary pension is when the first person passes away, the spouse will normally get a 50% income and there for life. And then when they pass away, that money will come to an end. So there are certain scenarios, if everything else is correct, then it may be possible to look into that. We should certainly consider making contributions to junior ISA for children or grandchildren. So the good thing with these is, again, you've got a cash ISA version, and you also have an investment ISA version. Now, if the children are not going to need this money for a long period of time, i.e. more than 5 years, then maybe right now you might have it in a cash ISA version. You should certainly consider whether the cash ISA is the right place for that money, because cash ISAs are not having any growth. You should look at investment ISAs for the children over 5 years. This means that the money will continue to grow, and it can help them when they go to university, or when they want to do maybe buy their first car. So again, we want to make sure that the money is growing in the right way. Otherwise, in real terms, it's going to be worse off. we should consider making use of small gifts, and I'll have a look at these in the next few slides. And we should take advantage of interspouse transfers. So here we are talking about capital gains tax. So there are some things that we can do to help to mitigate the impact of capital gains tax. So one of the things that you can do with regards to capital gains tax is you can, where the assets are held in one person's name, they can be split into both husband and wife's name. The benefit here is that you get to maximize 2 lots of capital gains tax allowances. So that's really good. It helps to reduce the amount of capital gains tax you pay. The other thing you can do is, for example, you can sell some assets just before the end of the tax year. So you could do it by about the 5th of April, and then you could sell some new assets, some more assets in the new tax year, i.e. after the 6th of April. That way, you're minimizing your exposure to capital gains tax. And the final thing you can do with regards to managing your capital gains tax exposure is you can defer the sale of the asset until your tax position changes. So let's say, for example, you're a higher rate taxpayer, and in the future, you're going to be a basic rate taxpayer, or you're a basic rate taxpayer, and in the future, you're going to be a nil rate taxpayer because your income's going to slow down. Then clearly it makes sense to wait until the point where your income changes and then sell the asset, which will help you to manage the amount of capital gains tax you pay. So we will now have a look at the nil rate bands, what they are and how they work. So for an individual, the current nil rate band is £325,000. For a couple, it's currently 650,000, i.e. 2 lots of £325,000. There's also something called the main residence nil rate band. This was introduced in from the 6th of April 2020. Well, it was actually introduced 6th of April 2017, but the full allowance has now come into play since the 6th of April 2020. So this means for an individual, the allowance is £175,000, and for a couple is £350,000. So what this means is for an individual, we had a nil rate band of 325,000, and you've got the main residence nil rate band of 175. So that means for an individual, they have a total allowance of £500,000 before any inheritance tax is payable. Anything above £500,000 will be subject to inheritance tax at 40%. Now, for a couple, you've got the 2 nil rate bands, you've got 2 lots of these. So the total allowance you have available to you is £1 million. So £1 million, assets below £1 million mean you don't need to pay any inheritance tax. Assets over £1 million, you will need to pay inheritance tax when the second person passes away. Now, if you're slightly below £1 million or you're not quite at the £1 million, you might think, well, I don't need to worry about it. I'm not at the £1 million. But if you think about it, asset prices will continue to increase. You'll probably continue to build up more savings if you're not spending all of the money, and you will be getting closer to the £1 million. Now, another thing that's worth pointing out that's very interesting, and we have to understand the impact of this. In the recent statement by the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, he announced that inheritance tax bands will be frozen until 2026. So this means more and more people are going to get caught by the problems of inheritance tax, because the allowances are going to be frozen up to £1 million. They're not going to increase, but yet asset prices will continue to increase. So this means more people are going to get caught by the inheritance tax. So you've got to be really careful, and it's been frozen for 5 years, and that's a significant impact on wealth. Now, when we're talking about individuals, we are talking about single people, or we're talking about divorced people. Well, for couples, we're talking about married or widowed. So these are the allowances that we've mentioned so far. Now, these allowances, certainly the main residence nil rate band, will apply to one property that's been your main residence. If you had another property and you've lived in another property in the past, then you are able to nominate the value, the property which you want to benefit from this main residence nil rate band. It's passed on death. You've got to make sure that the property is passed on death to direct descendants. Direct descendants will include a child, including step, adopted, or fostered child of the deceased and their lineal descendants. So a lot of times we come across scenarios where assets are going into certain types of trust. Now, what you've got to be careful with certain types of trust is that it's been set up in the correct way. So the problem with some of those trusts is it could mean that you end up losing the main residence nil rate band, which means that you'll end up paying more inheritance tax. It's fully transferable. Both of these bands, the nil rate band and the main residence nil rate band I've mentioned so far, are fully transferable. So some time ago, previously they were not fully transferable. Now they are. So this means if somebody passed away already and the surviving spouse, everything went from the person who passed away to the surviving spouse, then this means that the allowance will also be available. So where the person has passed away, the second person who received all the assets from the first person, they will also be entitled to the allowances, i.e. £1 million for a couple. So that's good that the allowances are transferable. So to summarize, total nil rate bands, including main residence nil rate band, for an individual is £500,000, and for a couple it's £1 million. So this now brings us on to assets over £2 million. What happens when you have assets over £2 million? So this is an area where the government has introduced some extra legislation. And what that means is you have to take some additional care when we're dealing with these assets. Now, in some cases, you might be thinking, I haven't got £2 million, so I don't need to worry about it. But it's not based on what the value is now. It's based on what the value could be of these assets when you pass away. So you have to think, okay, this is my age right now. If I live to another 10, 15, 20, 25 years, what's going to be the likely value of these assets? So although you may be below £2 million now, but this is based on something that will happen in the future. So therefore, as asset prices go up, people living longer, that means more and more people will get caught by this rule of assets over £2 million. What happens? So the main residence nil rate band is reduced by £1 for every £2 above £2 million. In this example, if your estate is worth 2.2 million, i.e. £200,000 above, then you will lose £100,000 of the main residence nil rate band. This will bring your allowance down from £1 million down to £900,000. And therefore, as a result of this, you're going to end up paying an additional £40,000. If, for example, your assets are worth 2.7 million, then this means that the main residence nil rate band will go down to zero. You will always have your basic allowance, your nil rate band of 325 each. So your allowance will be £650,000 where assets are above where assets are 2.7 million or above. This means that you're going to you're losing £350,000 worth of allowances, and that's going to cost an extra £140,000 in tax. Now we want to make sure that your planning is as robust, as efficient as possible, so that you're not stuck with these various different types of problems. We're going to extend this the points that we will look at in a little bit further. So on this slide, we are looking at a very real and very realistic scenario. I've come across this quite a few times, and it's where the family ends up paying 64% inheritance tax. And this is in just 3 generations. Now, I'm going to explain really step by step how this is a big problem. So in this example, the first generation, i.e., let's call them the grandparents, they've got assets of £1 million. So that uses up their nil rate band. They've also got assets, further assets of another £1 million. Now, we know that when they pass away, 40% inheritance tax is going to be paid, i.e. 400,000. And this means that the second generation will now receive £600,000. Now, the second generation, let's call them the parents, they've also done well in their own right. They've got assets up to the allowances of £1 million, and they receive this £600,000. Now, let's say, for example, they were to pass away just 5 years after the first generation passed away. So anytime after 5 years, if they pass away, there's going to be a further inheritance tax on this amount that we're talking about. So in this scenario, a further 40% is going to go to the taxman, i.e. another £240,000. So what we talk about is tax on tax. Now, by the time we get to the third generation, i.e. The grandchildren, from the original million, £640,000 has been paid in tax, 640,000 or 64%. That's huge. That's absolutely massive. And you think the third generation, the grandchildren, they're only going to receive £360,000. So in this example, you can see that the taxman is the largest beneficiary. The taxman is getting the biggest slice of this pie. The smallest slice is being left to the grandchildren. So we've got to be careful of this scenario as well. And this scenario will happen just where the second generation have passed away just literally 5 years and afterwards. Anytime after 5 years, then this problem will become very, very relevant. And I've seen this happen. It's unfortunate. It's just a lot of tax. So we need to make sure that we're taking steps to avoid this. Is a huge problem. The fact that it's 64%. Right, so what we're going to have a look at now is different types of gifting exemptions. Now, some of these numbers are actually very, very small. And the reason for this is that the numbers were set by the taxman, by the Inland Revenue many years ago. And they haven't really been updated or changed, even though things have moved on, things have progressed. These numbers have still been like this for a long time. So let's have a look at where you give away some small gifts of £250. The benefit is that it will save you tax immediately. You can give away to as many of these £250 to as many people as you like. You have an annual gift exemption. So each person who's making the gift has an annual gift allowance of £3,000. So husband and wife can give away £6,000 between them. You can also make gifts in respect of wedding gifts, i.e. before the civil marriage ceremony takes place, you can give away gifts of up to £5,000. Each person, each parent can give away £5,000 when their son or daughter is getting married. So again, there are considerable tax benefits. Now, what I would say is, although these numbers are small, it's still worth trying to use these allowances where possible. We don't want to waste these valuable allowances. We want to make sure that they're being used in the most tax efficient way to help you reduce your taxable estate, and therefore help you to reduce the overall amount of inheritance tax you pay, and ensure that more of this money stays within your family. So yes, whilst the numbers are small, that doesn't mean we should ignore them. We should still try and make use of these allowances. Now, one of them which is really underutilized is the regular gifts from income. So we talk about surplus income. The key thing here is that there is a difference between capital and income. Capital takes 7 years to get it outside of your estate, whereas if you make regular gifts from your income, ideally as it arises, then we're able to get that money out from your estate immediately. The good thing is there's no upper limit to how much you can give away. So let's say you've got an income of £10,000 a month after tax and expenses. I've just used an example of 10,000. It might be lower, it could be higher. What you can do is you can give this money to your children. You can give it to your grandchildren. and certainly benefit from this regular gifts. So regular gifts will allow you to get this money out immediately without the need to wait for 7 years. Once it stays in your account, it then, after over a period of time, it then gets called capital, and capital takes 7 years, whereas income is immediately outside of your estate. Now, the revenue are totally happy with you giving away your income, as long as it's regular, as long as it doesn't have any impact on your lifestyle, and we can prove that it was income and not capital. So what happens is, in this scenario, let's say, for example, you have income of £5,000 after tax. Let's say you have expenses of £4,000, then you're able to give away £1,000. But if you've got if your income and your expenses is £5,000 and you're giving away, you're trying to give away income, then the revenue will classify that as revenue, as capital, and therefore there'll be a longer time to wait to get it outside of your estate. So we need to try and use that. And then, of course, you can make gifts to a registered charity and benefit from inheritance tax savings there as well. Now, in terms of estate planning, we'll just summarize some of the things that I've mentioned on the previous slides. So first of all, we talk about maximizing the annual exemption. Each person has a £3,000 allowance. The husband and wife between them have £6,000 in total. If you haven't used up the allowance for the previous year, you're able to go back to the previous year and use up the previous year's allowance. So between a husband and wife, if each person had £3,000 each, that's £6,000, you can go back 1 year and also give away another £6,000. So that's £12,000. Now, in terms of this gift, first of all, it's important not to mix it with the small gift, because that has different, is treated differently. But so make sure you don't mix the two. What we would say is the annual gift. If you're giving this annual gift of £3,000, remember, it's your annual gift, i.e. the person who's giving it away, they're allowed to give away this £3,000. Now, that makes no difference whether you have one child and you decide to give them £3,000, or you've got 3 children and you decide to give them £1,000 equally. The fact is, £3,000 is your gift. So it doesn't matter it doesn't matter how many children you have. It's just based on, this is what you're allowed to give away. We could consider, so up till now, we've talked about some of these exemptions and how we can utilize these exemptions. So for example, we could put money into junior ISA contributions for children. This will help to use up your allowance, i.e. the money will be immediately outside of your estate. The money can build up in the children's accounts, children's ISAs. That can help them in the future. The money can be invested, so they're getting capital growth. They're staying ahead of inflation. Of course, that's very important. And it can help them in the future if you think about things becoming more expensive, like cost of living, education fees, etc. All of these sort of things you have to start thinking about from as early as possible. And then you can also make pension contributions for grandchildren or for your children. And the maximum you can put in it is £2,880. The government will give you tax relief, which will be another £720. And that brings the figure up to £3,600. Now, if you did this every year, you benefit from growth rates. You benefit from compounding, i.e. the longer you leave it, the better the compounding will be. You benefit from growth, compounding, favorable tax treatment within pensions or ISAs. Then you can see that this is going to build up to a very good sum of money in the future. So here we're now going to have a look at what happens with taper relief. So taper relief, if you give away assets today, you have to survive 7 years. Now, the value of assets you're giving away, let's say you're giving away £325,000 each, then you have to survive 7 years, first of all. If you don't survive 7 years, that will just be treated as a failed gift. You won't get any benefit of taper relief. Taper relief only applies after you've given away £325,000. So let's say you made a gift of £325,000 today, and tomorrow you made another gift of £100,000. The £100,000 will start getting some benefit after 3 years. So within the first 3 years, if you were to pass away, there would be no tax relief. You'll end up paying the full 40%. But what happens if you pass away after more than 3 years? Then the amount of inheritance tax will get tapered down. It will get reduced in line with the table below. So what we'll see is that if you survive between 3 to 4 years, the amount of tax will reduce from 40% to 32%. If you were to survive between 4 and 5 years, the tax will reduce to 24%. Between 5 and 6 years, it goes down to 16%. You can see between 6 and 7 years what happens. And then once you survive 7 years, this money will be fully outside of your estate. So what this tells us is that it's important to try and think about giving away assets as early or as soon as possible. The earlier you start giving away these assets, the better your chances will be of survival, and therefore the taper relief becomes more powerful, i.e. if you as long as you survive at least 3 years, then you start getting the benefit of taper relief on funds above the £325,000. Looking at trust and estate planning. So for example, you can look at gifting during your lifetime. So we've talked about some small allowances so far. You should certainly make use of those. You should look at giving away larger amounts, because with those small numbers, unfortunately, it will actually take a very long time to move the value of the estate, considering that the value of the estate is always continuing to increase. You should consider making sure that your estate is arranged tax efficiently, that you've got wills, you've got lasting power of attorney. So these are really important in terms of this planning, in the sense that a lot of people we come across, around about 60-65% of people, unfortunately, do not have wills. When I speak to people about the reason why they haven't got a will, then a lot of times I'm told nothing's going to happen. And my answer is always, but how can you be sure nothing's going to happen? And the other reason people give is we haven't got around to it. We're busy. We've been very busy. Now, of course, I understand, I appreciate that people are busy. There's lots of things going on, but at the same time, the will is one of the most important things that you can do. If you want to have some certainty over how the assets are going to get distributed, if you want to make sure it goes to the right people, then you need to have a will. They're not expensive. There's really not a reason not to get a will. If your circumstances change in the future, then you can always change it. But you should really all think about making sure you've got a will. And if you've already got a will, you should look to review it to make sure that it's still current and appropriate for your circumstances. Then you need to think about lasting power of attorney. So this is to do with loss of mental capacity due to accident or illness. This can happen to anyone at any time. So a lot of times when I'm speaking to the clients, they've got it in place for their elderly parents who are maybe late 70s, maybe 80s. So they understand why power of attorney is important. But when I ask them, what about yourselves? Have you got power of attorney? Now, bearing in mind that they're probably going to be in their 60s, it makes sense that they also start thinking about it. It's not just old people that could get impacted by loss of mental capability. I've seen it happen to younger people. It can happen to anyone at any time. So if you don't have it in place, then it means you're going to have to fill in a lot of forms. You're going to have to pay fees to the Court of Protection. Your bank accounts will get frozen, and it creates problems in terms of money in, money out. If you haven't done these things, I would consider that you start thinking about these things. Make sure you protect yourself. Don't leave anything to chance. It's just not worth it. And we'll also have a look at how we can use life policies to cover any liability to inheritance tax. So in terms of life insurance, there are a number of different types of life insurance we can consider. In this example, we are focusing on a joint life, second death, whole of life policy. So joint life means husband and wife are covered. Second death means that it passes away when the second person passes away. Now, in this example, we based it on £100,000, and we've assumed that both people are non-smokers and they're in good health. Of course, if they are smokers or their health is not great, then the premiums will be higher than this. So one of the things I always recommend to clients, to people, is make sure that you've got some form of protection in place. Now, the cost of the life insurance does not need to be expensive. It's actually a very good, very cost-effective solution. So for example, if both applicants are age 45, we're putting in place cover for £100,000, then the premium is going to be around about £97.12. And this means that you need to live to the age of 130 before you've paid in £100,000. So that's a good payout. And also, this is assuming that you live to 130. If you don't live this long, or you have a shorter life expectancy, then you have to bear in mind that you haven't paid that much for this life policy. If you're slightly older, 55 years old, then the premium is going to be a little bit more expensive, which is £138.66 per month, and your life expectancy is going to be 115. If you're 65, then as you get older, it's natural for the premiums to be more expensive, because all of this is based on the risk to the insurance company. The older you are, the higher the risk to the insurance company. And in this case, you would need to live to 107. And if you're 75 and you're in good health, then yes, you can still get whole of life cover, £308.18, and you'd have to live to 102. So what this is showing you is life insurance, the earlier you take it or you start thinking about it, the better. What it's telling you is the people who take it at 45, although they're paying it for a longer period of time, they end up paying less than someone who takes it over at the age of 75. And the reason for this is because the premiums are, the insurance company is receiving premiums over a longer time. There's less risk with 45-year-olds compared to 75-year-olds. So therefore, life insurance could be a good solution. Certainly attractive where some of the other options are not possible. Like, for example, I've mentioned so far giving away capital, giving away your income. But sometimes you might actually think, well, what happens if something changes in your health or your circumstances and you need the asset or the income? If you've given it away, sometimes there might be other tax complications that we need to consider, like, for example, capital gains tax. So we have to look at all of these things. You have to also think that sometimes you may not be in a position to give the assets away. You might need it for your longer term security, your longer term peace of mind. Whereas a life policy, if you've got the asset which is making you surplus income, then that income you could use it to fund a whole of life policy, which will then pay off the tax. So that's a really, really good solution. The other thing you can do with this life policy is, if you wanted to leave some money behind for your children, i.e. you've got 2 children, you want to leave them £50,000 each, you could do this. You could do this £100,000. You could do slightly more. And the good thing with this type of solution is there's no investment risk. The premiums are not invested. The money does not go up and down. Therefore, you can see, like I'm showing, you can see that you can work out your life expectancy. You can work out the cost. If you leave that money in your bank account, remember, if you're not spending the money on whole of life policies to create this value, and you're leaving this money in your bank account. So let's say over the years, you manage to build up an extra £50,000 by not doing a life policy. Remember, you're going to end up paying inheritance tax on that £50,000. So it's better to spend it in a way to create the lump sum to pay the tax. Now, of course, I have to point out that inflation will have an impact on these numbers in the future. So you will appreciate that £100,000 in the future is not the same as £100,000 today. In the future, the value of that £100,000 will be significantly less because of inflation. But what you'll also see is that these premiums that you might think, wow, that seems quite steep at this moment in time, you have to also remember that you have to adjust these for inflation as well. So if you think about it, £100 10 years ago may have been considered a good amount. Now £100 when you go to the shops is going to buy you significantly less than what it bought you 10, 20, 30 years ago. So the sum assured will be impacted by inflation, but also the premiums you're paying will also be impacted by inflation. Moving on to have a look at trust now. A lot of people may be thinking, what is a trust? How does it work? So we're going to have a look at this. A trust is essentially a legal arrangement. It allows a third party, i.e. a trustee, to hold assets. And the role of the trustee is they've got to be responsible. They're in charge of looking after the assets. So you would normally choose people close to you as family members, people that understand your situation, and you know the people that will act in line with your wishes as well. Now they will hold this money for the beneficiaries. Now, if you set this trust up, then your children can be the trustees and the beneficiaries. Yes, that's absolutely fine, not a problem. Or your children might be the trustees, and you're giving this money for the benefit of your grandchildren. So trusts are very, very powerful. They've been around for a long time. It's one of the ways to preserve your wealth, protect it, and to ensure that more of your money passes into the future generations. So key things with trusts are they can be used to help you to transfer wealth. So it can go from generation to generation. So that's very, very tax efficient. It allows you to maintain control, because whilst you're alive, you're still a trustee. So you have a say what happens in the money. If you just give the money to your children, then first of all, you don't have any say in the money. Secondly, if there's any situation like, for example, a divorce, or the business doesn't do so well and the business fails, then that money is going to be liable to risk. Whereas if you put it into trust, you've got control, and you're protecting it, especially when you're using a discretionary trust, against divorce or bankruptcy. A lot of times the clients do say to me, the biggest thing that they're concerned about is if they give the money to the children. One is, if what happens in the event of divorce, we don't want to lose all of this money. The other thing is in the event of bankruptcy. So a trust is a great solution. Now, I would also point out that sometimes people think, we know that there's going to be a divorce happening, or a bankruptcy, or some type of scenario in the near future, and we're going to put the money into a trust to avoid it. In that case, a trust is not really going to be suitable, because the trustees in bankruptcy or divorce proceedings will be interested, and they will say that you've done this deliberately to deprive the assets. So that will not offer you any protection. So, but where you're doing it under normal circumstances, there isn't any sort of issue like this, then absolutely trust is a great way. They've been used by many generations, and it's a very powerful, very flexible way of passing this money. Before we go on to the next slide, it's also worth going back to my previous slide where we talked about the inheritance tax at 64%. Now, that applied where the assets were being passed directly from the first generation to the second generation, i.e. in their own name, and then it's going over to the third generation. Whereas if you put it into a trust and you've done it this way, then you're avoiding that problem. That is a very, very big problem. This is a great way to make sure more of your money is protected. We'll now have a look at the different types of trust available, what they are, how they work, and who they might be suitable for. So the first one we're talking about is what's called a gift plan. There's numerous benefits for using a gift plan. The first thing is, like I've mentioned so far, you've got control, assets are protected, but also investments will be outside of your estate for inheritance tax planning, providing you survive 7 years. So then after 7 years, you're able to put more money into a trust. So you could think about it this way. Every 7 years, you'll get a new nil rate band allowance. So you could put 325 now, or as a couple 650, survive 7 years, and then you could put more money into a trust again. And then another 7 years later, you could put more money into a trust again. So what we're saying is, the earlier you start this planning, the better it's going to be, the more efficient it will be, the more robust it will be, because it's being done early before anything happens. It will allow you to use up some of your annual allowances. So every year, if you wanted to, you could put in £3,000 into a trust as well. absolutely fine. Any growth in the investment is immediately outside of your estate for inheritance tax purposes. So you put in £100,000, let's say after 7 years, £100,000 becomes 150. Your £100,000 will be outside of the estate, but whatever growth it generates from whenever it generates, that money is going to be outside of your estate from a tax point of view. So again, super efficient. And then at St. James's Place, we set up these trusts along with the investments. There isn't a separate charge for setting up the trust. We have all the paperwork, we do it on a regular basis. So we set up the trust along with the investment, but for setting up the trust, there's no additional charge. The other good thing with trust is from a paperwork point of view, it means that there's very minimal amount of paperwork to do. So for example, there's no annual declarations, there's no self-assessment. The money is in the trust. It's not generating income, therefore you don't need to fill in annual self-assessments. So looking at the uses of the gift plan, it allows you to make maximum use of inheritance tax exemptions and reliefs. So I said you could put in a maximum of 325 individually or 650 into a trust. You can do that every 7 years. If you're thinking about you want to help your grandchildren in the future with school or university fees, then again, it's a great form of planning. It will help you to get the money out from your estate, providing you survive 7 years, but it'll also build up this money for your grandchildren. Whereas if, for example, your children are giving money to their grandchildren for school fees, remember, when they're making the payment for the school fees, they've already had to pay tax on this money to get access to it, and then they're able to do it. Whereas if the grandparents do it, it's much more efficient as well. So it allows you to distribute your assets, it allows it to stay within the family, and it's being used for things that will help your children or certainly your grandchildren in the future with expenses like school, university fees, because every year it's becoming more and more expensive. The key things are that the proceeds from the gift plan can be received by your beneficiaries quickly without avoiding any delays. And also, where a discretionary trust is used, funds in the trust will not form part of the beneficiary's estate. So like I said, if there was any scenario of divorce or bankruptcy or anything like that, and you've used a discretionary trust, you've done it well in advance, then there's going to be absolutely no problems there. The money, whilst it's inside the discretionary trust, is going to be fully protected. And that's really important. One of the benefits, major benefits, is that you have significant asset protection when using a trust. So we'll now have a look at the discounted gift plan. So in this scenario, we're talking about a situation where you'll get an immediate reduction in your inheritance tax liability. The good thing with this type of planning is it allows you to give away your capital, but still retain access to the income without breaking gift with reservation. So this plan will allow you to retain a fixed amount of income. You're not going to pay tax on this income because it's not treated as taxable income. So it provides what we call this income for life. It's a fixed percentage, regardless of whether the investment goes up or down. You're entitled to a fixed percentage when you set up this type of trust. The income may be provided without an immediate inheritance tax liability, provided these payments are within the allowance. If there's income exceeding these levels, then it might result in an income tax. So usually, to avoid this income tax liability, we say maximum income that can be taken out is 4%. Now, this means that if your fund is growing at a rate of more than 4%, then even after your withdrawals, your fund value will continue to increase. And that's important because you want to make sure that your money that you're leaving is still growing, is still keeping ahead of inflation, and you're maximizing the benefits there. Now, if, for example, your fund grows at a rate of less than 4%, and that might be just by having a very cautious portfolio where it may not offer as much growth, then what that means is your fund will start to get depleted because the amount of withdrawals is more than the growth rates. So we have to look at that, make sure that you're in the right level of risk to try and stay ahead of the 4%, because we want this pot of money to continue to grow. And I'm sure your children, your beneficiaries, it would be helpful to them if the money available was growing as well. So there's no inheritance tax liability on your investment provided you survive for 7 years. Taper relief will come in after you've given away the current nil rate band, £325,000. And we're going to have a look at an example shortly in terms of this plan. Again, like the gift plan, any future growth is going to be outside of your estate. So this is good. It allows you to do income tax plan. It allows you to plan your income, or you make sure you've got enough income, and it allows you to give away a lump sum to be able to reduce your inheritance tax. You might be having your money in a bank account thinking, I need access to this money, then to generate an income, then that money is going to be subject to inheritance tax, whereas this money could be into a trust and it can also generate an income. We've also had a few clients where rather than putting the money into a property to generate an income, because remember, when you buy the property, yes, he'll give you income, but the income is going to be subject to income tax. If you sell that property, it's going to be subject to capital gains tax. And as the property value increases, it's going to be subject to inheritance tax. So rather than having all of those tax issues, what a number of clients have done is they've put the money into one of these discounted gift plans, and they've used the trust to get it outside of the estate, but still make sure that they have sufficient income for their day-to-day lifestyle. Now, in this scenario, we're looking at a potential inheritance tax savings. Now, we're looking at a lump sum of £250,000. It's assumed that they're taking withdrawals at 4%. Now, if the person is 60 years old, then the value of the discount. So this value of discount is calculated by a HMRC formula. It's based on age, health, the amount of withdrawals you're taking, the percentage. So if you do it at 60, this is the most efficient in terms of this type of plan. The value of the discount is going to be 138,000, and you can see as you get older, the value of this discount goes down. Now, in terms of this discount, £138,000, there will be an immediate tax saving of £55,200 based on 138,000. If you're 70 years old, the value of discount will be slightly less because you've got less years to live. Therefore, the value of this discount will be 43,200. But even if you're let's say 75, you're still going to get an immediate reduction in your estate for £36,000. So what we're saying is, with this type of plan, it's worthwhile doing it as early as possible. We'll now have a look at loan plan. So purpose of a loan plan allows you to do something slightly more different to the other two plans. The other two plans required you to give away capital. One of them allowed you to retain income. This is where you're thinking, we might actually need more access. We might need more flexibility. We're not at that stage where we can afford to give this money away. Then a loan plan could be a very good solution. A loan plan gives you flexibility. It allows you to have access to the money, but what you're doing is you're giving away the growth. So in this example, let's say you got £100,000. You want access to your £100,000. So that £100,000 will stay in your estate for inheritance tax purposes. But the idea is, as you need it, you're going to draw the money out from the loan plan. That will then be money that's being spent out of your estate. And then what it does is, any growth that the investment has, let's say you put in £100,000, you can take some money out as and when you need it, but the growth in the value of the investment is going to be outside of your estate. So what it does, it allows you to keep access to your original capital, but give away the growth. Because you might think, as long as I can keep hold of my original capital, I can have access to it. It allows me to do whatever I need to do. That's really good, but I don't need the growth. So this plan deals with the growth, but you keep access to your original capital. It allows you to reduce your inheritance tax. You've got access to your capital, so you can access the capital, or you can take it to top up your income. So you've got a couple of choices there. Investment growth is immediately outside of your estate and not subject to inheritance tax. And there's no inheritance tax payable on establishing the trust. Okay? And again, paperwork is kept to a minimum. So those are the three different types of plans. Now, certainly when we look at giving away assets, or we look at this gift plan, or we talk about giving away assets to a trust, what we would usually recommend is life cover over 7 years. Because what you want to do is you want to be bought and braces. You want to make sure when you give the gift away that as long as so if you survive 7 years, your planning will work. But if unfortunately you do not survive 7 years, then you should consider a 7-year policy. The premiums will be a lot lower. The key thing is because it's just a short time to cover any tax on the gifts that you're making. The good thing is with this, you're not with this, it keeps the premiums down. You only need it for 7 years. If you survive 7 years, your planning has worked. If you don't survive 7 years, then your planning has still worked, and that's the important thing. We'll now have a look at a couple of other solutions. So far, we've talked about assets where you're giving away to a trust, which may not always be possible. You may need access to the asset. You may need the income. You may not be sure what's going to happen in the future. You may not be able to get life cover because you've left it too late. Your health may stop you from getting life insurance, or ultimately the premiums may be very high because of either your age or your health, and it might just not be affordable to you to pay those premiums. So what you have the option of is look at enterprise investment schemes. Now, these are higher risk investments. They're not going to be suitable for everyone. So we mention it as another strategy that can be used. So key things with enterprise investment schemes is that the government is keen to encourage investment into smaller companies. By investing in these types of companies, you'll get income tax relief, so you'll save 30%. So good thing with this compared to a pension, when you put money into a pension, you can only get the relief on money that you've received through PAYE or on earnings, not dividends, certainly not rental income. Whereas with this enterprise investment scheme, you can use the money from rental income, dividends, anything that you're paying income tax on, and you can use it to claim back the income tax. So for example, if your income tax is so for example, if you put in £10,000 into this plan, and as long as you've paid £3,000 of tax, income tax in the year, then you're able to claim back this £3,000 or 30% of income tax. It allows you to defer capital gains tax. So this applies where you've sold an asset in the last 3 years, or you're planning to sell an asset within the next 12 months. So it's a great way of deferring it. Of course, when you come out of this asset, then the capital gains tax will be payable. But if you keep holding in this type of investment until the point of death, then capital gains tax would get wiped out at that point. And then as long as the money's been in there for 3 years, it will achieve inheritance tax savings. So that is the good thing. Now, when we look at these types of investments, yes, there are a lot of tax advantages, but we have to also balance it off with the risks involved. Now, I said it's a high risk, it's considered higher risk. It may not be suitable for everyone. So we need to understand, make sure that this is the right type of product. So if it's not the right type of product, i.e. if you've not done investments before, or you're not comfortable taking a high level of risk, we would say this is not going to be the right type of product for you. Okay. And then what we're now looking at is we're looking at business relief. So this is investing in smaller companies, unquoted, unlisted type of companies. What it's showing you is the survival rate, and it's showing you age at the bottom. So what it shows you is somebody 80 years old, they've got a very good chance of surviving at least 2 years. Someone who's 85 or 90, they've still got a reasonably good chance of surviving 2 years. They've got a better chance of surviving 2 years than they have of surviving 7 years. With regards to this business relief, it will be, there are a couple of rules that need to be followed. First of all, you've got to hold it for 2 years. So let's say husband and wife take out this investment 2 years ago. One of them passes away 1 year later. As long as the survivor carries on for another year, they survive for one more year, then between them, they've met the 2-year qualifying period. Therefore, you'll get the inheritance tax relief. So if you put in £100,000, you survive 2 years, you're going to save 40%, £40,000. So that's great. Also, you've got access to this money, whereas the trust, they required you to give away the assets. And then you've got the second rule. The second rule is that you must have held these shares at the point of death. So where you meet the 2-year qualifying criteria and you meet the criteria of holding the shares at death, then it will be free from inheritance tax. So that will save you 40%. And what we have is we use different fund managers, different types of strategies. There are some funds which are going to be more about capital preservation and essentially surviving that 2 years and saving the inheritance tax. And some will be linked to investments that will be a bit more volatile, or maybe possibly a lot more volatile as well. So you have a number of options. The other thing you can do with business relief is you can combine it with life insurance built into the product. So for this, you pay a slightly higher percentage. Now, what this means is by getting this life cover, if something was to happen to you before 2 years, so you set one of these up today, let's say something happens in 2 months' time, then at least you've got a built-in life cover. And that means that you've got protection almost from day one, just in case you don't survive 7 years. So again, it's worth having a look if it's suitable. Right, so we're now moving on to main residence property planning. So this is one that I get a lot of conversations on. I get a lot of interaction and a lot of questions as well. Now, a lot of people will say to me, I'll just give my residential property away. I'll carry on living in the property and my inheritance tax problem is solved. It's never that easy, never that straightforward. Things like that just will not work from a planning point of view. And also, if it was that straightforward, everyone would do it, and the revenue would lose billions of pounds in tax. So first of all, essentially, there's two main scenarios that we can consider. So in the first scenario, you give the property away to your children. Your children continue to live with you, so that's absolutely fine. Now, your children will need to contribute equally to the running cost of the household. So if you've given them 50% of the shares, they will have to contribute 50% to the running cost of the household. Now, the problem with that is in both of these scenarios, the problem is that you've diluted your ownership of the property. Now, that in some cases can lead to some undesired situation. And that could be, for example, the children could end up forcing you out of the property that we've seen. If the children get divorced, then you're going to end up losing a share of the property. So again, you've got to be very careful. Now with this, in terms of splitting the household bills, it should really be done from the moment that the property is being given away. The second scenario is where you give property away and the children don't live with you. So in this case, you've given away 50% share of your property. Your children don't live with you. So as they don't live with you, you will now have to pay them a 50% market. You'll have to pay them the market rate of rent. Obviously, you own 50%, they own 50%. So you will have to pay them based on 50% of the property. The revenues view will be, for this to be a proper transaction, it has to be a commercial rate of rent. It can't be a family rate or a discounted rate or anything lower than the market value. It has to be what the value of that property is. You should be paying the right amount of rent. Now, when your children receive this rent, it's treated, rental income is treated like any other income. So your children will need to pay tax on it. So it's certainly a problem where with their 40% taxpayers or even 20% taxpayers that could push them into 40%. The fact is you have to pay this income for as long as you stay in the property. Your children will need to pay income tax on the rental they receive. So in a lot of cases, a lot of scenarios, this type of planning is not going to be that attractive. Now, you have to also bear in mind that the paying the rent should be from the time that you give away the asset. So let's say you give away the asset 7 years ago, and you think, oh, I've given the asset away, I've survived 7 years, but I haven't paid any rent. I'll start paying it now and it'll be okay. It doesn't work like that, because the revenue will say that you've actually had a benefit of living in this property. We will start the 7-year clock from the time that you pay the market share of rent. So if you give it away 7 years ago, you now start paying rent today, then your 7-year clock will really be starting today. So up till this point, you haven't achieved any inheritance tax benefits. So those are the two scenarios. So scenario one is you all live together. Hopefully nothing changes in the future, and you pay the running cost of, you share the running cost of the house. Absolutely fine. Second scenario, you can give the property away. Your children don't live with you. You have to give them a market share of you have to pay a market rate of rent, and they have to pay tax on that money. That's income tax. But a lot of times, by the time you've done the numbers, it doesn't actually work out as worthwhile. So far, we've talked about a lot of different options that you have available. So my main purpose, my main objective was to really give you an overview of this very complex area, really show you the sort of things that you need to think about, why planning is important, because there's a lot of unknown variables in terms of this planning. So I've got many years of experience of helping clients in this area. So to summarize what I've been talking about for since we started today, you've got a number of options. One is you could put the money into a trust, okay, and you benefit from the protection, the flexibility, the tax advantages of the trust. You could consider life insurance, 7-year life policy to age 90 if you're sure you're going to give the assets away by age 83. Or if you think you're not going to give the assets away, or you're going to rely on them, or you just can't give them away because of the tax complications, then you might look at whole of life policy to cover the inheritance tax. We can have a look at tax efficient investments. So I spoke about enterprise investment scheme, business relief schemes, and these are higher risk schemes, so not going to be suitable for everyone. And the final option is spend or give your money away. Now, this is the one which is probably the hardest out of all of them, because how much money can you spend? How much money can you give away? Even if you spend or give away the majority of your money, the problem is you've still got a main residence. The main residence is still going to continue to increase in value. So although you're giving money away, you might be spending it, you might find that assets will still continue to increase. And there's nothing you can do about that over a period of time. Asset prices will tend to increase over time, 5 years, 10, 15, 20 years, asset prices increase. So we have to consider these. So those are the options. It's never a straightforward case of just one option. It could be a combination. There's a whole range of strategies that are provided. And the more strategies, the more closely we work together, I know the more efficient your planning will be, the more robust it will be, just in case whatever different things happen in the future. No one knows what's going to happen in the future. So we have to keep an eye on all of these factors. So I think it'll be useful to summarize everything that I've been talking about. So at the beginning, I mentioned the objectives, the key things that we'd be looking at, and we spoke about the concerns. The concerns are the ones that apply to everyone. They're all worried about inheritance tax. We've all seen people pass away before COVID, and certainly during COVID as well. So we want to make sure as much of this money passes onto your family members as possible. We looked at some initial planning ideas. So ISAs, they're not tax efficient from an inheritance tax point of view. We also spoke about the low rates of return on ISAs, and it might not be the best place for your money. We spoke about pension contributions. You have the opportunity whilst you have the earnings. to put significant amounts in. You've got previous year's allowances. Plus, you also have, if you haven't got earnings, you can still put money into a pension. We spoke about the different nil rate bands. So nil rate bands, 325 each. For a couple, it's 650. And we also spoke about main residence nil rate bands, which could give an individual an allowance of 500 or a couple an allowance of $1 million. We looked at the problem of IHT, inheritance tax, at 64%. This was to do with the 3 generations. It's a big problem if the second generation pass away just 5 years after the original, the first generation, and it's very, very possible. It's not unrealistic scenario. So we have to be careful of that. We spoke about gifting. There were some small numbers that I put up, which haven't been changed, but we also need to combine it with some larger allowances to make sure that we're getting the value of the estate down. And we talked about the 7-year rule, which will give you benefits in terms of the earlier you start giving benefits away, the more you give away, the less tax there will be overall, and you'll benefit from taper relief if applicable. We spoke about wills, power of attorney. If you haven't got them, I would suggest you have a look at getting them done. It's never exciting. It's never going to be on anyone's top list of priorities. There's always 100 other things to do, but I would say think about it, do it, get it done, protect yourself, protect your family, give them peace of mind and the security that your assets will go in the right direction. Power of attorney, really important if you lose mental capacity. And then we spoke about the 3 different types of trust solutions where you're giving away assets, i.e. the gift plan. You're giving away the asset but retaining income, which was the discounted gift plan. And the final plan allowed you to retain flexibility. So really important, use trust, make sure that this money passes from generation to generation. It's staying in the family, and that's the important thing. Yet the other major benefit with trust is that it does give you significant protection in the event of divorce or bankruptcy. So you have to take all of these factors into account rather than just give it directly. If you give it directly, yes, of course you can do that, but you have to also be aware of risk factors. There is also a risk, although it might seem unlikely, but you've passed the assets over to your children. What happens if your children pass away before you pass away? I've also come across a scenario recently where the parents, they were worried about the inheritance tax. They were in their 80s and they transferred all their assets to their son. And the wills that the parents had made was that yes, of course, things will go to their son after they pass away. But in this scenario, the son actually passed away, and the assets then went to the wife took over those assets, and unfortunately, she pushed the parents out. So that was a very unlikely. No one really expected the son to pass away. He was a lot younger, a lot healthier. Parents in their 80s. Everyone thought, okay, parents will go first. But just giving you an example of things are not always as straightforward as we think they are. We can look at life insurance, so really powerful tool, certainly where you can't give away the assets. You need the income. You don't want to do risky things like enterprise investment scheme. This one, you've got money coming in. We're spending the money to create the lump sum to pay the tax man. Really, really powerful. And it's you haven't got all the tax complications as well. Then we talked about some slightly more risky things, like, for example, enterprise investment schemes, business relief, main residence property planning. So that covers everything. So I'm just going to summarize. Well, I've got a question now to ask. A couple had 10 properties during their lifetime. So during their lifetime, they spent their time building up their portfolio over many years. They looking after each one of the properties. So they had to maintain it. They had to insure it against loss. They were paying the mortgages off over 25 years, collecting the rent, dealing with any problems. On final death, why did their loved ones end up with only 6 properties? Well, that's because 4 properties have gone to the taxman. Okay, who were they looking after 4 of the properties for? So you could say that the 4 properties that they were looking after, they were also looking after these properties for the taxman, because they spent all these years doing all of these things, getting rents in, maintaining, paying taxes. So they were just looking after them for the taxman. And who did the beneficiaries question why nothing had been done, especially when they knew that things had to be done. So what I would say is try and plan your things as early as possible. Don't leave things unplanned. We all think nothing's going to happen to us, that we're invincible, but the stats don't lie. Every year, certain people will pass away. Young people, middle-aged people, older people. It's gonna happen. Burying our head is not going to be the solution. You have to take action or start thinking about it. Start planning these things. It's the only way. And like I said at the beginning, inheritance tax planning can take many years. It's not something that's done. You do something and that's all you're planning. You have to look at a number of different options. So thank you for listening to the presentation, taking your time this evening. I hope you've really enjoyed it. And now I'm looking forward to question and answers.
First of all, a very, very, very big thank you, Dipesh Bhai. I know someone says too much to digest, but definitely it is, because it's not a simple thing, is it? So
no, it's really not a simple thing. The Chancellor himself has said that it's a complicated system. It's complicated and it's unfair, and important to start taking advice, start planning things early.
Right. Before we go into questions, couple of things. People have put down their email addresses. I have forwarded you the link. The link itself is on the chat as well. So you can all go back and catch up on જેટલી વાર રિવાઇન્ડ કરી પાછું જોજો જેટલી વાર વધારે જોશું આપણને ધીમે ધીમેમાં સમજ પડશે. ત્યાં સુધી I know it's too much. મારે પોતાને અમારે બધાને જ આપણે બેસીને બધાએ આ જોવાનું છે, સાંભળવાનું છે, થોડું મગજમાં ઉતારવાનું છે. Plus, Dipesh Bhai, is it okay to give your contact number? If so, please let me know. So then I'll put it on the chat.
Yeah, shall I put it on the chat?
Yes, please go for it. And again, Dipesh Bhai, as we all know, he's a very busy man. It will be between the individual and Dipesh Bhai to take this on if you have any personal questions, and that will be his professional time that you'll be taking. So that will be after today's event. So we'll be looking at all the questions. We'll be rushing it through, trying to cover as many as we can. We'll try and cover most of them. But once again, there's lots of thank yous, Dipesh Bhai. So thank you very much for your very valuable time. Okay, and yes, thank you everyone saying to Bhai Paresh and myself. But thanks to all, today's thanks goes to Dipesh Bhai for giving up. Literally is a very, very important time. I'm going to go through my phone, and God, I've got lots of photos here. We will, I mean, saying that, you have covered few questions that I was reading. Did you have a chance to look at the questions that I sent you, Dipesh Bhai?
I had a brief look, yeah, just a brief look.
No, I had some, okay. We'll take the questions from the chat. Okay. At what age does, it says at what age, I'm not sure, but so 7-year period, you said 7 years. So when does that start?
As soon as you give the assets away.
Okay, simple as. Would it be possible to go on to health LPA when he covers it at the end? That was a question. But lasting power of attorney, you've said. And we have got a link on YouTube link as well. We did a different session. So today was mainly on inheritance tax, but you still covered a little bit of lasting power of attorney as well. So
I think it's important. If I don't cover it, then I'm not really covering all of the wide areas. I wanted to cover as much as possible for everyone today.
Sure. If someone has flexible draw down pension account and has named beneficiaries upon death, is the amount in drawn down account on death part of estate for IHT, or is this excluded from IHT?
So with pensions, if you pass away before the age of 75, then any money in a pension pot is going to be free from inheritance tax. After 75, If you pass away after 75, then the money in the pension will be subject to income tax as they take the money out. So if you don't take the money out and it stays in the pension, that's absolutely fine. There's no tax. But if you take it out, then there'll be tax. And you can plan it in a way that as your income tax position changes, that can be used to minimize the amount of tax that you pay as well.
Okay, thank you. Someone is saying, my husband is 70 years and I'm 68 years. Is it worth us putting in lump sum in our private pension?
If you have the earnings, it's a great opportunity. So I've got many clients who are still working. So when we talk about earnings, we talk about from employment. If you've got a limited company, you're still working, you're receiving salary and dividends, then the limited company can put it in. But if you're not working or you haven't got income from employment sources, then the maximum you can put in is 2,880. The government will top it up to £3,600.
And what happens to pension funds at the age of 75 years? What is the limit of pension fund? Is it 1.5 million?
1.5 refers to a lifetime allowance, a previous lifetime allowance. So what the governments have been doing over recent years is they've been reducing the amount of allowance. So previously the lifetime allowance was 1.8 million. Currently, it's been reduced to £1,073,100.
Okay. Now, I'm sure all this, whatever we talked about, it is for UK based only. Is that right?
Everything we've spoken about is based on UK rules, UK law.
Okay, brilliant. Is your state pension and company pension classified as your income? If so, can I pay any of these funds into SIPP to get 20% contribution added by HMRC?
You mean if you're already getting a pension, yeah?
Yeah, well, that's the question, yeah.
I think it might be difficult because I think there's something in place in terms of that. I'd have to look into that a bit further.
Fine. Is it true that if I marry after my retirement age, my to-be wife's income will not reduce my state pension? I don't know what.
I'm
not sure what that.
I'm not sure they should be worried about that if they're thinking about getting married.
Okay. Can you share some advice on planning for single people with no direct dependents? For example, can they make any amount of gifts out of ordinary income to other relatives with no tax consequence?
Yeah, so any gifts you can give away, so you can utilize all of the allowances that I've mentioned so far. You can give away your surplus income, that's outside straight away. Don't forget you've got the £3,000 annual allowance for this year and the previous year. You can make charitable donations as well. You can also, if a nephew is getting married, you can also make some gifts in respect of wedding. It's a lower figure, though, it'll be £1,000.
Okay. 75% of my main residence transferred to children and the parents live in that property. Parents live more than 7 years. Is this valid transfer and excluded from IHT? Do the parents still get full main residence allowance? I think you covered that.
So I've covered that. There was a scenario 1, scenario 2. If your children are living with you, you need to split the running costs. And if your children are not running with you, you have to pay a market share of the market rate of rent.
Okay, if I have put down my children's name in the will, the property is still under my name, and it's been over 7 years, how does that work?
It won't have any impact because the will only comes into play at the point when you pass away. What we're talking about is the property right now is still in your name. Therefore, when you pass away, the will determine how the property gets distributed, who it goes to, but it's still going to be part of your estate.
So does that still come under inheritance tax, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still a property, still an asset in your name. The will will not by itself will not reduce your tax liability.
Okay. Okay. There's so many people asking for link. we will talk about it at the end. Okay, I'm a basic rate taxpayer. By giving money to charity, how can I save 40% IHT?
So by giving money to charity, that money will be outside of your estate. So when you pass away, there will be less money for the taxman, and you've also made some charitable donations, which is always good.
Okay, and do these rules apply to state benefits?
Do the rules apply to state benefits? So I mean, state benefits. State benefits will have stopped at the time that you've passed away. When you pass away, it'll be what the value of the assets are. If it's above the liability, then there will be tax. Yeah.
How can a life policy that is written in trust to a child or grandchild be used to pay for IHT? My estate uses a life policy proceeds underwritten in a trust to pay my IHT. Doesn't that count as a reverse gift from child to the parent?
No, because when you set up the trust for the life policy, what will happen is if you've got life policies and they're not in trust, then they need to go into trust, because what happens is when you pass away, let's say you've got £100,000 life policy, if there's no trust, that £100,000 will come into your estate, and therefore it's going to cost you some tax. Now, where you've put that life policy into a trust, that's fine. It's outside of the estate. Therefore, you're not going to end up paying unnecessary additional tax on that money.
Okay. Is life insurance income added to your income for IHT purpose? Again,
life insurance income. It's not income. It's capital, unless it's a family income benefit plan, but that's something different.
Okay. Can we gift the property to our children, even if it has mortgage on property in our name? If yes.
So if it's a main residence or a buy-to-let, yes, you can give it, but the new people taking over the property, the children, will have to be assessed in their own right for mortgage affordability. So they will have to go through the standard application for the mortgage to go into their name. And also the other thing is, if it's a buy-to-let property, then there will be some capital gains tax, and there will be some stamp duty issues as well.
Okay. So again, that's part of the question was, if yes, can we keep the rental income from it? And who pays the tax on the rental income, us or our children?
So if you give the property away, then you should give the rental income away. It has to be a proper, genuine transaction. What you can't do is give the asset away and still continue to receive the income or a benefit, because that's breaking the gift with reservation rules. So if you give the asset away to your children, they get the rental income, they pay the tax.
Okay. Are there any single premium whole of life policies? I don't know what that means.
Single premium whole of life policies, I think they're quite rare. They used to have them. I'd have to look into it a little bit more.
Dipesh Bhai, do you have a combined life insurance policy which includes accidental death and accidental injuries, loss of limbs, eyesight, etc.?
So accidental policies, we don't really do those policies. Now they only pay out in the event of accident. That's why they're called accidental death policies. So if you died from illness or old age, or it was just time to go, then those policies will not pay out. So we don't really
do that.
They're very basic. You might pay a very low amount, maybe £4, £5, but they're not going to help from a inheritance tax point of view.
Thank you for that. Do you pay inheritance tax on life insurance policy? Same thing. Aren't trusts expensive to create? But you said
the trust we create, there's no separate charge for creating the trust.
Can we put property in trust for the benefit of our children and still keep the income for our benefit?
No. So what you have to think about is, you've got this cake, and what you're talking about is giving away the cake. But what you were saying is you want to have your cake and you want to eat it. So the revenue will say no.
can't do that. What about tax on trust? Oh, sorry, I'm just going to put it on that. What about tax on trusts? Somebody's asked that question. So
yeah, there would be tax on assets within the trust. Like, for example, if you hold a property in your name, you've got to pay tax on the rental income you receive. Same, if you've got the property in a trust, you've got to pay income on that. You've got to pay tax on that income.
Okay. Once we create trust, do we have to mention details in our will about the trust?
Not necessarily, because these are lifetime trusts. If you're creating a trust within the will, then yes, it's included there. But these are lifetime trusts, so you wouldn't put that into the will.
Okay, next question. I think you already answered the question. What is the cost of setting up a trust and ongoing cost of maintaining it? The cost, you said there's no extra cost. But
there's no cost for setting it up or maintaining the trust. That's all done within the investment.
Okay, next question. My property is worth 800K. What are the consequences if I leave it to my daughter?
So if this is a single person, and then their allowance would be 500,000. So there would be tax on anything above 500,000. If it's a husband and wife, then, and if this is the only asset they have, then there's no inheritance tax. But you have to think, if the value is 800,000 now, the value, if it increases over $1 million, or that plus the other assets you hold is over $1 million, then there will be a tax liability in the future. So you have to think about some planning beforehand to make sure there's no liability.
Okay, so we assume that this could be a single person, or if there was a partner who's passed away a long time ago, over 7 years, how does it affect in the property into inheritance tax? Does it still combine as a couple's?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be 7 years. The person might have passed away longer than 7 years, but as long as all the assets transferred from the person who passed away to the survivor, then they will also benefit from the allowances. So they'll get the combined allowance of £1 million.
Okay, thank you very much. What proportion of your property can you realistically give away to your child but still live in it, with each of you meeting the relevant proportion of the running cost?
It's based on the percentage. You can give away 10% and pay and split the percentages 10%, or you could give away 90%. If you give away 90%, you've got to pay 90%.
Can we give our main residence to children and have lifetime tenancy right agreement for us?
There's problems. There's always problems when you give the property away and you continue to live there.
Okay. What does tax and admin cost in a trust? We just answered that. Can we put properties in a limited company in a discounted gift plan trust?
No, the two structures are totally different. Limited company, you may have property, you may put it into a limited company, but again, before we do that, you need to understand all the calculations, because sometimes it's worthwhile, but sometimes, depending on your circumstances, may not be worthwhile. Discounted gift plan is to do with cash money. You've got cash money, not earning any return in your estate. You want an income that does all the jobs. Okay.
Can I sell my property to my child at a reduced price to get around IHT?
No.
That's the straight answer, no. That's it. If you have a private pension and if you do not withdraw it and you pass away, what is the IHT implications?
So if you pass away before 75, the money will go tax-free to your family members. And if you pass away after 75, they'll pay income tax at their normal rate of income tax.
Okay. I think, again, this is a pension. Putting a lump sum in my private pension, how many years I can go back to invest in the pension?
Providing you've got earnings, providing you've also got a previous pension. So let's say you've got income of 100K and you haven't put in any contributions for the last for 4 years, then you can put in £40,000 for this year. You can go back to 2018, 19. You have to go back 3 years. You can put in 40k, and then in 1920 you can put in the balance 20k. So that would be your 100k.
Okay. Probably, I don't know. Do we have to pay IHT on RECENDENT property?
Sorry, what was that? REC?
Rescindent property.
Resident property.
Well, unless they've spelt it wrong. I'm just reading what they've said. RECENDENT, but it could be residence property.
I think it could be residence. Do you have to pay IHT? Yeah, if you're above the limits. If you're below, no.
There could be some financial jargon that I don't understand. Dipesh, I highly appreciated. This is very valuable information. What are the consequences if I leave my property to my daughter? It was does income from property become IHT exempt once the property is in the trust?
Well, it's assets that are subject to inheritance tax, not income. The income, what happens is if the property is in your name, then the rental income, you're gathering it. If you gather this income, it's added to your assets. Whereas if it belongs to the trust, the income will belong to a trust. So the property and the income don't belong to you. So therefore, that will not be subject to a tax.
Okay. Shall I quickly go through the ones that I sent you? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. If all the formalities of making the will is done, including registration of probate, but the amount of money given in there increase in our bank or savings, what can be done about this?
I wouldn't worry about that because the value of your savings will go up and down on a regular basis. So what happens is in the will, you will make reference to my assets unless you've got maybe certain things that you want to give to certain people. So you might say, I've got this painting, I want this painting to go to my son. But generally in the will, it talks about all assets and it talks about the percentages, unless you've got certain gifts that you want to give to some people.
Okay, thank you. Please, can you ask my question? For the inheritance tax, I have a collection of stamps and other antiques and ancestral jewelry. Do we have to declare for the inheritance tax?
Yeah, because the inheritance tax is going to be based on all assets that you have in your estate. Anything that has value is added up and forms part of your estate. Okay.
Next question. I got my 3 children names are in the will. As one of my son is living abroad, if me and my husband are not around, house assets will be shared with 3 of them. Do they still need to pay inheritance tax? My son who is abroad, him as well. What happens?
So it's nothing to do with the son who is abroad. The inheritance tax is based on the value of your estate. So if it's above the limits, then yes, there will be tax.
Mm-hmm. What is the minimum earning amount from inheritance for tax deduction applicable? But I think that you've answered that. What is the minimum earning amount from inheritance for tax deduction applicable?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
I'll have to go back and check who's. It just says, can I ask a question? And okay, what is the minimum? I'll check that. Please. One more question. Oh no, that was about son being abroad, and I have put him as the executor in our will. With my other 2 children, they are here in UK. Can he be executor in future if my kids sell the house where we are not around? Will my son who is abroad, same thing? Will he get the share in our home? Does he need to pay tax?
So if he's got, if there's a valid will, it shouldn't make any difference if he's living abroad. He'll still get his share of the assets. If the will says 1/3 each equally, then that's what he'll get. In terms of an executor, yes, he can be an executor living abroad, but you have to think, is it is it practical? So when the parents pass away, he's going to normally the executors, they're the ones that need to tidy up everything. They need to be here, they need to get paperwork, they need to look at bank statements. So yes, it can be done, but ideally they should be here. Well, they could be here at that time.
Yeah. Is there an IHT implication if we want to contribute towards a mortgage deposit for our son?
So the standard rules will apply that you're giving the deposit. So let's say, for example, you're giving £50,000 to your children to help them buy a property. As long as you survive 7 years, that £50,000 will be outside of your estate.
Otherwise, it will still count. Yeah. Okay. Calculated. If you got son name in property with parents, how much inheritance tax applied?
So a lot of times people think, I'll just add my son's name or my daughter's name and I'll save the tax. We don't need to do anything else. That won't work because there's things called the reservation of benefits. When you give something away, you can't get any benefits. If you're getting a benefit, then you're not going to achieve any inheritance tax savings.
So sorry to ask you, can you just explain that a little bit? If parents want to put their son or daughter's name in the property, did you say that's not as simple as what in our mind will think? Yes.
Yeah, a lot of times people think I'll just add my son's name or give my share to my son or transfer, whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. So what we're saying is we have to go back to those two scenarios. If you're scenario one, your children live with you, then you split the running costs. If they don't live with you, scenario two, you have to pay a market rate of rent. You can't just add their name on, carry on living there, get benefits, not pay tax. It won't work.
Okay. So for example, scenario one, if they're living in the same household, you still need to show that they're paying towards the rent or whatever, yes?
Running cost of the house. So they should open up a joint bank account, put the money in, and make sure they got detailed, proper records as well.
Mortgage ન ભરવાની હોય અને ઘરનો ખર્ચો એ લોકો આપતા હોય તો શું થાય?
Sorry, one question from Ba, that if we're living in the house and if there's no mortgage and if the children are paying the household bills and everything, what is the situation then?
So the property's been given to the children, the share?
No.
So the share should have, if from an inheritance tax point of view, so if the property is still, let's say in this case in Bar's name, then the asset is still there in her name, and they'll add up everything from an inheritance tax point of view. The bit to do with the contribution towards the household cost, that's more relevant if, for example, a share is being given to them. If the value is less than £1 million and the children want to pay the bills, that's absolutely fine. Then in this case, Bar can keep hold of the property. That's fine.
Thank you very much. To reduce IHT, can we put the second property rented in trust for the benefit of your son in the event of your death? If the property has got mortgage outstanding, if yes, what is the procedure and could there be a problem if after putting in trust we have to remortgage or extend the mortgage which is in my name?
So I think there's a few questions there. So first one is, yes, you can put the second property into trust. Of course, the rental income must belong to the trust and that will go to the beneficiaries. You can't put it into a trust and take the income for yourself. The mortgages, you would normally need to arrange the mortgages in the correct way, where they're aware that it is going into a trust.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers the question because, like you said, there are a few questions in one. Now, there's a question scenario: old couple live with a son and together and jointly owned. They have two properties with approximately £1.2 million. They've transferred 2 million into a trust, so the estate for the three would be 1 million. one of the properties in let out in rent and they live in the other property. The property prices are stable at present, but they are likely to go up in the value in future. Say after 3 years, the combined value of the properties is £2 million. The couple have already made wills. The dwelling house will go to the son when his parents pass away, and the rented property will go to the son and his 2 siblings in equal shares. They've never lived in the property which has been let out on rent. What are the IHT implications, assuming both parents pass away at the same time? Hopefully this will be covered by the talk.
So that is a really complex question. First of all, it talks about assets of £2 million going into the trust. So I'd like to know, I would need to know how they got that £2 million into a trust, over what time it was done, what type of trust is it? Is it a discretionary trust or an absolute trust? Because there are differences in the limits that you can put into a trust. And then I think I kind of got lost halfway in that question. So I think, to be honest, I think that would need a lot more investigation. I don't want to give you half an answer, which is not totally correct. I need to know the full situation. I need to think about it and then give you an answer. So yeah, if you contact me, email me, then we can look into that.
One question, I think this depends on, you did say single couple. What is the amount of estate assets liable to pay IHT? Is it 500 or above? But you
500 and above if you're a single person, single or divorced, and $1 million for married or widowed.
Okay.
You don't have to.
Okay, and I'm just going to have a final check on the chat. Does the income of the beneficiaries in a trust affects the mortgage of the property in the trust?
I don't think so. No.
Would selling my property to my child not constitute a simple transaction at a lesser price, as the property will have been sold from one party to another?
So the revenue, where you have these interfamily transactions, let's say the property is worth 800 and you sell it to your son or your daughter for 600, the revenue will say that you've done this deliberately because they can look easily how the other values, and you've got to have had valuations or risk surveyors. So they will say that you've done this to avoid the tax. So it won't work.
Is ISA savings free from IHT?
So like I mentioned, most ISAs will be subject to inheritance tax.
Yep.
Certainly, yeah.
And I'll try and read this. Thank you. Who would check the precise tax paid is correct? Also, if unable to pay tax bill, must they liquidate assets?
So usually assets would need to be liquidated. There will be transaction costs as well. Yeah, certainly some assets would need to be liquidated to pay the IHT.
Okay, and I think the questions are all done. If sorry. Okay, what is the duration that one needs to pay the inheritance tax? Is there a limited time frame that you need to pay in 4 years or?
I think it's normally about 6 months.
Okay, all right.
6 months.
Like I said, to each and every RPM family members, I think I have covered all the questions. I've tried my best, taken photos, but if I have missed any, please, again, what happens is chat will be closed just now. So please send us the recording. Please send us the recording. It's there on Paresh Mehta, RPM Live Events, no YouTube Maja. So when you type in Paresh Mehta, RPM Live Events, you will see, as you know, આવશે talk on inheritance tax ના અંદર માં જ આવશે. તમે હું જ્યારે બેઠી હતી મને જેટલા મોકલા નંબર મોકલા ઈમેલ્સ મોકલા I could forward it there and then. પણ પછી હવે જ્યારે હું વાત કરતી હોય તમે બધા ઈમેલ્સ મોકલા છે, બટ હમણાં આપણે બંધ કરશું તો chat વયું જશે. If you still want to, if you got my number,
We'll
please
just
send
it
me.
on groups.
And I will just send it on all the RPM WhatsApp groups that we have. We will copy the link so you can all access it from there. But then ek sathe જ મળી જશે. But before we go any further, a big round of applause. Big thank you. Dipesh Bhai, brilliant. Thank you so much for taking out your time.
બધાને કેટલું સરસ રીતે ડિટેલ્સમાં સમજાવ્યું ભાઈ. તમારો ઘણો ઘણો આભાર. અને આજે છે ટોક એ બધાય માટે ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ છે. each and every person. એટલે તમારો ઘણો ઘણો આભાર કે અમારે બધાને ઘણી બધી આમાંથી જાણવા મળ્યું છે કે હજી અમે તો ઓલામાં જ રહેતા હોય કે આ લખી દીધું છે વિલમાં એટલે ચાલશે, પણ અત્યારે હવે આ બધી સમજ પડી કે ના ઈ એમને એમ નથી ચાલતું બધું. એટલે તમારો ઘણો ઘણો આભાર ભાઈ.
Dipesh Bhai, again, I'm just going to echo what Mum and Roni have already said, and all our RPM family members. As you may know, what RPM is for. It's we've put together a family. We've inherited this family as over a period of all the lockdown. We do events to kind of help people who are alone and lonely, and we've created such a big family which you are a part of. And each and every one of them is absolutely grateful for you for taking your time today to give us this insight in inheritance tax. There's a lot of conversations which go around. There's a lot of whispering going on, Chinese whisperers and things like that. And it's better to hear it factually from yourself. And I'm sure if anyone out there wants any advice, Dipesh Bhai is welcome to provide a service for you. And
just put the number again, Dipesh Bhai Joshi's contact number, as everybody's asking me.
Yeah, so Dipesh Bhai na number share contact chat upar. Please be mindful of his time. He's quite busy, and please keep your questions relevant to the kind of subjects that you want to talk about. And especially the other thing I'm also going to ask, it's great for you to share a question with us, but be mindful of the information. Tame amne trust karo cho. Ame tamne trust kare che. But then we also still need to be mindful of the information we share about ourselves personally on groups like this. Apne willingly આપણે conversationમાં રહે છે, આપણે એકબીજાનો ટ્રસ્ટ છે એટલે આપણે એ પ્રમાણે કરીએ છીએ. પણ તો પણ હું કહું છું, તો પણ આપણે છે ને માઇન્ડફુલ રહેવાનું છે. આપણે ઇન્ફોર્મેશન કઈ શેર કરીએ છીએ on groups like this, so be very careful. Dipesh Bhai, do you want to say a few words to our RPM family before we finish for this evening?
Yeah, thank you to Paresh Bhai and Rohini Ben for organizing and allowing me to present. Thank you to the RPM family. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I think there were lots of questions. I looked at the audience numbers. It looks like a lot of people have still stayed on. And from my point of view, that's it's always a good sign that people have enjoyed it. People have been engaging. They've been asking questions because they are concerned. And what I would say is, if anyone wants to discuss it in a private audience, because certain things you may not feel comfortable sharing on a group forum, certain personal information, then we're happy to have a chat, help you understand what the issues are and what can be done to give you that peace of mind. And I think peace of mind is really one of the most important things. You can't really put a price on it. A lot of people have listened. Hopefully it's been improved your knowledge and your understanding. I understand that, of course, there was a lot of information because I'm trying to cover a lot to cater for a general audience. But if there's anything you're not sure about, please feel free to get in touch, email or phone. You've got the contact details. Rohini Ben has the contact details. And I wish everyone the very best in the future. Hopefully we're coming to the end of the COVID situation. Still need to stay safe, but hopefully things go back to normal fairly soon for many people.
First of all, I know I should have said in the beginning, but we have to thank Krupali Ben for introducing you to us as well. So it was, sorry, I've put down, I do apologize. We've got other Dipesh Bhai Joshi in our family. So please excuse me in the chat. I've gone with Dipesh Bhai Joshi. So let's
Dipesh Bhai Shah.
Get rid of that one. I'll put another. અમારા જમાઈનું નામ દીપેશભાઈ છે
Brahman community માં join થઈ ગયા છો.
As I was saying, Krupali Ben is the one who introduced us, so thank her very, very much, and we do appreciate you as well giving up your time.
Just a feedback from me. The scenarios that you gave, the last scenario, and a couple of other scenarios that you gave are very, very useful, because within a talk, when you create a scenario and deliver a scenario, it brings to life the kind of conversation, the information you're trying to provide. So that was very, very useful, especially the last one. So if you've got other scenarios like that, and if you want to come back and do a concise version of taking some scenarios, things like that, which may be helpful for more understanding, to kind of condense
I'm happy to come back and do it in a slightly different format, because there was a lot of information. Sometimes it might be easier to take it in over 2 sessions. I appreciate it's late in the evening or getting a little bit late, but yeah, there are different ways we can deliver the presentation. Happy to come back. A lot of times I do find with various community centers, when I do these presentations, a lot of times it's because it's the first time you're hearing it in this much detail. Sometimes you think, I actually need to hear it again. The more times you hear it, the more it makes sense.
I mean, that's why we've got it on YouTube, and they can watch it over and over again. And what I would be interested in is breaking, because all the subjects that you talk about, there are certain areas. So trust, maybe a talk on just taking the trust side of things and explaining more in-depth detail about how the trust works and things like that. Just giving an overview of that, and then maybe taking 2 subjects and then taking another 2 subjects at a later date, maybe more, because you can see the numbers of how many people were interested. It was quite good. And for nowadays, where things have opened up, that's a pretty good number. They had about 380 people who joined today. So that's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much, first of all.
તમે ગુજરાતીમાં explain નથી કરી શકતા?
I can. I have done presentations Gujarati ma, but some of the words you have to do through English ma as well. There's not a translation, but I have done it. But some bits I have to think, because I'm trying to do the talk which I'm used to doing in English and convert it into Gujarati. So it can be done, but there has to be some English in there as well.
કારણ કે છે ને અહીંયા આજે આની અંદર છે આ ફેમિલીમાં બધા લગભગ મારી ઉંમરના ને ઘણા બધા એજ વાળા છે, એટલે ઇંગ્લિશમાં જરાક સમજવામાં અમારા જેવા માટે ઘણું અઘરું પડે.
So what I do is sometimes meeting કરે, then I speak a local clients at Gujarati ma, and some bits they understand it by explaining in Gujarati. So yeah, I can do that when I do a meeting as well.
Okay. Thank
Brilliant.
you. Yeah.
But no, it's been absolutely fantastic this evening. Like you say, it's quite late now, and I'm sure you've got to get back to the family. But before we do that, we're going to say thank you to all our YouTube followers. Please do not forget to subscribe on the channel. It may say Paresh Mehta, but it is to do with RPM live events. So please look forward to tomorrow's event, which is to Ghazal